All right, so I've been using Enclomiphene on and off for the last 2 to 3 years, and honestly, it's one of the compounds that's made the biggest difference for me. So I'm 27 years old. I've always naturally had high testosterone, somewhere usually around the 850 to 900 nanograms per deciliter, and I've always been a strong guy for my size, but I wanted to take my physique and my performance to another level, and I wanted to see how far I could push things without going straight to testosterone. Now, I had already used AOD 9604 and a few other compounds when I was getting super shredded for bodybuilding, and that opened my eyes to the world of performance compounds. So, Enclomiphene was one of the next things that I started looking into. Now, what's up, guys? My name is Rocky. A lot of you guys know me as Rockzilla from other platforms. I've been coaching people online for about 4 years now. I've been in fitness for over a decade, and I've helped hundreds of people transform their physiques and their lifestyles. Now, over the last few years, I've gotten extremely deep into the peptide performance, compounds, hormones, and everything surrounding that space. So make sure you shoot me a follow on all of my platforms because I'm consistently putting content on this stuff. And if you want to go even deeper, I also have my school community called Peptide Performance where I can get into the stuff that I can't always talk about in these videos before they get deleted. So we're going to talk about Enclomiphene. Enclomiphene is a SERM, which stands for Selective Estrogen Receptor Modulator. The easiest way to understand it is that it works with your body's natural hormone signaling, all right? It can increase LH and FSH, and those hormones signals your testes to produce testosterone. So instead of injecting exogenous testosterone, you're essentially trying to get your body to increase its own production. And that's why I chose it. I've never really had low testosterone. I've naturally been around, again, 850 to 900 my entire life. So I didn't want to immediately go straight to testosterone when I already had a system that was working pretty damn well. I wanted to see what I could get out of my own body first, and that's what made Enclomiphene so interesting to me, because testosterone replacement and stimulating your own production are two completely different approaches. Now, with TRT, you're introducing exogenous testosterone from the outside, and that can suppress your natural LH and FSH signaling because your body recognizes that it already has testosterone coming in. And that's part of why guys on TRT can experience their balls shrinking and why fertility and having kids can be an issue. With Enclomiphene, the goal is to increase that natural signaling instead. And for a younger guy, who wants to maintain his natural production and, potentially have kids later on, I think that that's something to consider. And the biggest thing that I've noticed from using it has been energy. I have more drive throughout the day. I wake up with that fire. I wake up feeling good. I wake up ready to train. I want to work. I want to be productive. And when you're training hard, working, running a business, and doing everything else that comes with life, having that extra energy does make a difference. My training's also been better. Now, I've always been strong, but when my hormones are in a good place, I notice that I have a lot more in the tank. I can push harder. I feel stronger, and my recovery is better. And my sex drive is high. And, that's honestly one of the easiest things to notice when your hormones are in a good place. Now, right now, my testosterone is about 1290 as of 3 weeks ago. And that's obviously, a huge increase from where I was naturally. But I also want to give credit where, it belongs. I've been active. I've been in the Marines. I've been an athlete my entire life. I've been training for years. I take my nutrition seriously. I recover properly. And I naturally have high testosterone. So I'm not going to give Enclomiphene all the credit for my physique, but using it has absolutely made an impact on my training, recovery, energy, sex drive, my overall performance. And when you combine all those things, that can have a huge impact on how you look and how you perform. I've also seen some good results from my clients and friends whose testosterone had increased over 400, after 2 or 3 months of using it. And that's one of the things that I find so interesting about this compound. You can actually see a significant change in some people's numbers without introducing testosterone from the outside. Now, I do want to talk about the part that everybody's probably waiting on, side effects, okay? Because this is still something that affects your hormones, and you need to understand what could go wrong or what could happen. So the biggest one that I pay attention to is estrogen. Whenever your testosterone increases, some of that testosterone can convert into estradiol, and estrogen is not the enemy here, okay? So men actually need estrogen for a lot of their important functions. But if your estrogen gets too high, that's when you can start noticing problems. You can notice things like water retention, mood changes, nipple sensitivity, which could turn into gynecomastia. Yes, Enclomiphene can give you gyno if your estrogen gets out of balance. Acne can also become an issue, especially if your hormones are shifting too quickly. And then, you have things like headaches, mood changes. You could lose your sight some. Your eyesight could be impacted. So those are things that I would actually pay attention to instead of just assuming that just because something is helping your testosterone, everything is good. All right. Now, one of the ways that I personally approach enclomiphene is by cycling it. I use it 2 months on, 2 to 3 weeks off. All right. And that's the way that I've used it over the past 3 years. That's just a protocol that I got from my coach. I'm not saying that this is a universal protocol and everyone should follow. This is just works for me. All right. I want to give my body a chance to operate without it. And then I can reassess where my levels and how I feel are. Another thing I like about this is you can actually monitor what's happening. You can look at your testosterone, your LH, FSH, estradiol, and other markers and see what your body is doing. This way you're not just guessing. And that brings me to another important point: fertility. So one of the biggest concerns that guys have with testosterone is what happens to sperm production. So when exogenous testosterone suppresses LH and FSH, your sperm production could drop. And that's the reason why, young guys who actually want to have kids, should just be mindful. Enclomiphene works through a different mechanism than that because you're trying to stimulate those signals instead of replacing testosterone from the outside. And that's one of the reasons why, I was able to, pull the plug and jump in. Now, you'll also hear enclomiphene being talked about in the context of helping people come off TRT. And that's because serums can be used as part of strategies aimed at restoring natural testosterone production from exogenous testosterone that has suppressed the body's normal signaling. And that's a completely different conversation than simply taking enclomiphene to increase testosterone. The point is that this compound has applications beyond just trying to get a higher number on your blood work. For me, the biggest appeal has always been getting more of what my body is already capable of doing. And, that's just how I look at it. Now, I don't think that you need to be deficient in testosterone to be interested in optimizing your hormonal environment. But if you're already training hard, you're eating properly, you're recovering, you're sleeping, and you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing, then getting your hormones into a better place can make a huge difference. I personally noticed that with, getting more energy, better training, better recovery, higher sex drive, higher testosterone, and just feeling like I'm operating at a higher level. And that's why I've continued to use enclomiphene for the last 2 to 3 years. And that's why I wanted to make this video to help you guys out. Because I think a lot of guys hear the word enclomiphene and don't actually understand what it is, how it works, why someone would choose it instead of, using testosterone, or what they should pay attention to if they commit to using it. Now, you got a better idea and a little bit more direction. Now, if you want me to go deeper in this, I can make an entire video on the blood work. I look at the side effects in more detail, how I structure my cycles, and some of the biggest mistakes that I see people make while using enclomiphene. And if you want even more information on peptides, performance compounds, training, nutrition, and all the stuff that aligns with this space, check out my school community, Peptide Performance. Make sure you follow me on all my platforms. Subscribe if you're new here, and drop a comment telling me what you want me to break down next. I appreciate you guys. If you have any questions, you know where to leave them.